Hi, welcome to Sleepy Jean. I'm reading a new book today. It's called Buffalo Girl by Bill Wallace. Chapter 1. Who in his right mind would ever want to go to Oklahoma or Texas? Oklahoma wasn't even a state yet. It was just a territory. And Texas, what was there in Texas? It was nothing but dust and wide open spaces and outlaws and dirty little cow towns. The freight train made a clickety-clack sound as we chugged over the tracks. Maybe in 50 years, maybe around 1954 or so, civilized people might be living in Texas. I doubted it, though, from what I had seen and heard about the place, but now I glared at Mother. She looked so prim and proper in her fine embroidered blue and white striped blouse with a high neck, her long pleated skirt draped well below her ankles as she sat reading the book she'd brought with her from home. Who would ever suspect, I mused. I continued to glare at her, as stylish and calm as she appeared. She had become rebellious and outrageous in the last month. Really, it had been longer than a month. It all began several years ago when Mother and Father attended a Save the Bison meeting with Ernest Harold Bain and William T. Hornaday. Baines was a writer from the Boston Transcript. Father had used some of Bain's articles in his newspaper in San Francisco and had become good friends with the man. Hornaday and Baines, along with some others, were trying to form what they called the American Bison Society. They spoke about how the bison was on the verge of extinction and what needed to be done to save it. I remember when Mother and Father had come home from the meeting. Mother was most excited, especially about the fact that a very influential and popular politician named Theodore Roosevelt had agreed to be honorary president of the society if it received enough support. Mother said she was most impressed with Mr. Roosevelt and could even picture him as president of the United States one of these days. Father did not agree, as he felt Roosevelt lacked the polish to ever be a successful candidate. For some of the few times in my young life I agreed with Mother. I liked Mr. Roosevelt. I was glad I chose her side because he did become president 3 years ago. However, Mother and Father both agreed that the American bison needed their help. That's where the trouble really started. Through numerous telegrams and letters, Mother found some others who were interested in the bison. Mayor Gordon W. Lilly at Pawnee in the Indian Territory, Charles J. Goodnight in the Badlands of Oklahoma Territory, and Scotty Phillips at Fort Pierre. All of them had private herds of buffalo grazing on their large ranches. After more telegrams, Mother found that Lilly was the only one of the three men still searching for buffalo to add to his herd. The last telegram had come 6 days ago. Then the first thing I knew, we were on a train bound for Texas. We'd been on one train after another trying to get to a place in the Oklahoma Territory called Pawnee. On the Union Pacific we rode in a fine Pullman car. It was the latest in luxury, and the dining car was most elegant. On the Atchison, Topeka, and Santa Fe, the Pullman was a bit older and not as nice, but every bit comfortable. When we changed trains once more to the Rock Island, the Pullman was old, drafty, and hot, but the dining car was the most beautiful thing I'd ever seen. Mother said it was called a palace dinner. It had fancy table trimmings that gleamed under the gaslights. We made the journey because Mayor Lilly, in his last telegram, had agreed to accept Mother's assistance in finding a herd of buffaloes and bringing it back to the safety of his ranch. Only when he finally got to Pawnee, he wasn't there. They told us he was at a place called Fort Sill down in the Nations, which was their term for the Indian Territory. Mayor Lilly was trying to talk some government people there into making a wildlife preserve where the buffalo would be safe. When we got to a place in Indian Territory called Chickasha, we found there was not yet rail service to Fort Sill and not even passenger service to the end of the line, a tiny town called Rush Springs. Reluctant to hire a carriage, Mother insisted that the man at the depot let us ride in the freight car. Next we would spend the night in Rush Springs before proceeding on to Fort by wagon. I wish Mother hadn't been so persistent. I sighed. With my luck, the wagon probably wouldn't even go to Fort Sill. We ended up having to ride horses, walk, and finally swing from Wine to get to the place. And if riding in a freight car wasn't bad enough, I also had to worry about getting shot by outlaws, carried off by wild beasts, and being scalped by Indians. I shot a blast of cool air up my forehead. I dabbed the glow on my brow with my silk handkerchief. How I longed to be back in my little room at home. There were lacy curtains on the windows and oriental carpet on the floor. I had a pink goose down comforter on my bed. The breeze that swept across Nob Hill from the bay was cool and crisp and clean. Even with the door open, it was hot in the cold old freight car. It smelled of wool blankets and chicken feathers. I hated trains. The clickety-clack of the steel wheels drummed again and again in my ears. Clickety-clack, clickety-clack. The dumb song that grandmother had sung for me before we left was sneaking back into my head, and there was nothing I could do to drive it away. Buffalo girl, won't you come out tonight? Come out tonight, come out tonight. Buffalo girl, won't you come out tonight and dance by the light of the moon? I danced with the girl with a hole in her stocking, and her knees kept a knocking, and her toes kept a rocking. I danced with the girl with a hole in her stocking, and we danced by the light of the moon. Buffalo girl, won't you come out tonight? Come out tonight. With the palm of my hand, I tapped my head, trying to knock that silly song out of my head. Still, it kept coming back in perfect rhythm with the clickety-clack of the train. Grandmother always went around the house singing little songs to herself. When Mother started talking about doing something to save the buffalo from extinction, I guess it was the only song about buffalo Grandmother could think of. Songs, especially dumb ones, are as contagious as a cold. One day when Grandmother was singing in the parlour, I made her stop. I told her that this trip was a ridiculous idea, and I was sure the only reason Mother had decided to go hunting for buffalo was because she'd gone crazy. Grandmother, who I had always been able to confide in and whom I trusted, just smiled and patted my head. When you turn 15 or so, she said, your mother's supposed to go crazy. She'll like to stay that way until you are about 21, and then you'll still have your doubts. I'm serious, Grandmother, I insisted. I am too, she mumbled back. But why buffalo? I think it was 67, maybe 68. I don't remember for sure anyway. It was the year your grandfather and I moved here from Boston. On the Kansas Pacific Railway, our train, a little lightweight locomotive called a tin pot, had to stop, so I heard a buffalo cross the tracks. There was a lot of buffalo back in those days. We waited hours for the woolly beast to cross. Your mother was only 5 or so, but she was thoroughly fascinated with them, even back then. We spent a day or so in Abilene. One of the most popular tunes there was Buffalo Girl. Your mother loved the song. She tapped her little foot every time she heard it. Now, how did that go again? All I had really wanted to know was how to get out of going on this trip with Mother. Instead, I'd gotten this long-winded story about how Mother fell in love with some buffalo back in the olden days. Grandmother had been no help. Father, who usually rushed to my rescue when Mother came up with these strange ideas, had been no help either. Your mother is a very strong-willed and capable woman. For a long time you've known she's not like the mothers of your friends at Miss Plimpton's school. She's never been content to stay at home and knit or mind the servants. She helped me at the newspaper. She takes reporting duties that none of the other reporters want. She travels, and from time to time she finds a crusade that she's most dedicated to. She has made up her mind to help save the buffalo, and there's nothing I can do to alter her decision. You might enjoy the trip, camping out under the stars. You love horseback riding. Besides, it would be good for you to get away. You spent far too much time sitting in the porch swing with that no-account, sugar-coated scoundrel Philip Montone. Next thing I know, you'll be wanting to ride round in the horseless carriage of his, too. Those things are just a frivolous plaything for the rich. Like Philip, they'll never amount to anything. I hated my family. Mother had gone crazy. There was no doubt in my mind about that. Mother led the way, but the rest of the house jumped right in to follow her. The whole bunch had gone crazy. I fanned my face with the silk handkerchief. Daddy was wrong about Philip. He was handsome, smart, and quite polished. I loved how he slicked his blonde hair smooth with a sweet-smelling hair oil. He wore nothing but the finest hand-tailored clothes, and he always had a warm smile. I loved his brown eyes, though they were set a bit close together. His eyes were pretty. We had plans for this summer. Phillips had talked his parents into enrolling him in the Nob Hill Riding Academy, where I took English pleasure and jumping. I had been taking riding lessons for 10 years since I was 5, so I promised to help Philip. We could spend hours riding, and in 4 short weeks, when I had turned 16, when I was to have my coming out party and could finally begin courting, he would take me for a ride in his shiny new horseless carriage. A coming out party is the most important event in a young woman's life. The thought of possibly being gone from home when it was scheduled, I simply couldn't bear to think of such a thing. Do you think Philip is a no account? Yes, dear, Mother answered without bothering to take her nose out of the book she was reading. Do you think he's a scoundrel? Yes, dear, she answered again, never taking her eyes from the book. I hated when Mother ignored me like that. Here she'd taken me from my friends and from Philip and from all the plans we had made for this summer, and she wouldn't do wouldn't so much as listen to me. I felt a mischievous grin tugging at the corner of my mouth. Do you think father will begin courting his secretary while we're gone? No, dear. Mother kept reading. She never looked up. I frowned, not quite sure about my mother. We finally reached Rush Springs. A barefoot boy of about 10 by the name of Will met us at the scrubby little building they called a depot. He took us and our luggage in a wagon to his Pappy Hotel. It was a 3-story red brick building, new and clean. It was fairly nice, but the furnishings were quite modest, and my bed was too hard. We had to wait forever for Will's mummy to heat water on her stove and bring it up to warm our bath. Early the next morning, we climbed aboard the wagon and headed across the hot, dusty plains for Fort Sill. I hated wagons. Chapter 2. The wooden wagon seat was hard as rock. Within a mile or two of Rush Springs, my bottom and back were sore. Even my teeth seemed to crunch and grind together with each jarring bounce of the wagon as we plodded over the dry, rutted wagon path that stretched forever across the prairie. We saw some mountains in the distance that were shrouded in haze and seemed almost blue. Them's the Wichita Mountains, the boy called Will announced proudly. Oklahoma ain't got many mountains. Them's kind of short, but that's downright pretty, ain't they? I cringed at his words, though he seemed somewhat bright. The poor grammar, the slang, the way the language slurred and twanged and sort of dripped from his mouth made the boy seem like a total idiot, a complete hick. I wondered if everyone in Oklahoma talked like that. The mountains drew closer, though it seemed to take us forever to get near them. Fort's right over yonder, Will slurred as we rolled from a stand of tall trees along a creek to a wide, flat field. Ought to be there right now. In the distance, I could see a group of men in blue uniforms about halfway across the big field. Another man on a horse galloped away from them. As he rode, he leaned down against the horse's neck. Then, sliding to the right, he fired a rifle. I shuddered at the terrible sound. I've always hated loud noise. One time when I was little, some balloons popped at Betty Riley's birthday party. I cried for hours. Mum and Father took me to the fireworks on the waterfront on 4th of July. Instead of enjoying the festivities, I got sick to my stomach and threw up. Then I hid under the carriage. Like I said, I hated loud noises. I hate trains. I hated this trip. I hated this wagon. Most of all, I hated guns. No sooner had the man fired his gun than he fell from his horse. There was a whoomp sound as he hit the ground, and a huge cloud of dust exploded. A loud burst of laughter came from the other men. They practically rolled on the ground, holding their sides and jumping around. A couple of the soldiers even fell to their knees. Besides them, sitting on top of the long-legged grey horse, was another man. He had no shirt, and in the afternoon sunlight, his skin seemed almost bronze. At first I thought he must be an Indian, but he was much too tall and slender. From all the pictures I'd seen of Indians, I gathered they were short and stocky. He was the only one of the group who wasn't laughing. The soldiers who had fallen from his horse stood up and dusted himself off. It ain't funny, he roared at the group. That only made them laugh harder. Rubbing his shoulder, the soldier picked up his rifle and started towards them. Quit laughing, it ain't funny. The tall, dark-skinned man rode up to him. You have to hook with your left leg and hold to the mane with your left hand, he called out. Pay attention, I'll show you one last time. With that, he dug his heels into the big grey side. As the horses raced at a dead-out run, the man slipped to the right side of the animal's neck with his left leg hooked over its back and his left hand holding the mane. He pointed the rifle under the horse's neck. A shot snapped above the sound of thundering hoof beats. At the base of a hill across the valley from where he rode stood a row of 4 posts. On top of each one was a sandbag. A puff of dust exploded from the first one he fired. The same thing happened when the second, third, and fourth. I hate the awful loud sound of rifle. Still, I was fascinated by the man's skill. I couldn't help but watch. An instant after he fired the last shot, he spun his horse and raced back towards the group of soldiers. Just before he crashed into them, he yanked the reins. His big grey horse almost sat down on its haunches as it slid to a stop. Most impressive, Mother whispered. I put my hand under my chin and closed my mouth. Yes, I breathed. The man didn't seem to notice the applause and cheers from the man, nor did he pay much attention when they patted him on the back and shoulders as he swung down from his horse and went to get something next to where they stood. He knelt and grabbed a shirt from the ground beside them. He pulled it on. No sooner had he touched his shoulders than he snatched his hat from the ground and stuck it on his head. Then, tucking in the tail of his shirt, he strapped on a pistol belt and holster. Finally, he picked up a saddle and blanket. Not once had I seen him glance towards our wagon, but as he saddled his horse, he pointed. The soldiers looked toward us. They must have thought they'd been alone with no one watching, because even as far away as we were, I could see the startled expression on their faces when the man pointed at us. Quickly the man swung into his saddle and rode towards us. He did not charge us as he had the soldiers. The grey nostrils were flared. He was used to running and was ready to go again. The man held him in. His horses came softly. "Mrs. Guthridge?" he asked as he swung down from the saddle and removed his hat. Will brought the wagon horse to a stop. He set the brake with his foot. "Yes, Mother Anson? Please forgive me. I was to meet you at the headquarters building. I should have been more presentable. Please pardon my appearance." Mother smiled. "You are perhaps somewhat early. You have no need to apologize." She raised her eyebrows. "You must be Mayor Lily." "No, ma'am. My name is David. I work for the mayor. He has been detained at the telegraph office and has asked me to escort you to the quarters that Colonel Stewart has provided. He promised that he will join you shortly." The young man smiled, then turned to me. "And this must be your daughter, Amanda?" I didn't answer. I only sat there looking at him. From a distance, because of his great skill with the rifle, I had judged him too much older, to be much older. Here he stood in front of us. I realized he was just about the same age as me. Besides, he was quite handsome. He has a broad, soft smile and the darkest blue eyes. So instead of saying, "Yes, I'm Amanda Guthridge," I sat there, my mouth flopped open like a total idiot, and stared at him. When I didn't answer, his blue eyes turned back to Mother. "If you would follow me, please." Suddenly my cheeks felt so hot they almost hurt. As he led the way back through the trees, I could feel the red sweeping across my face. I had made such a fool of myself. Why didn't I speak? I could have at least said, "Yes, I'm Amanda," but all I had done was look at him. Fort Sill was not at all like I'd expected. Instead of being built of tall logs with guarded towers at each corner, the fort was made of stone. It was a slow, rambling structure. As we drew close, I could see small slits built into the rock walls, places from which a man could aim a rifle and still be protected by the stone. There was a corral next to the fort, then another building in the distance, a little stone church with a steeple stood near the crest of a hill. Behind it was a big two-story house. Will pointed to it. "Headquarters," he drawled. "That's where I got to bring this here sack of mail and them blankets when we all get your stuff unloaded." David led us out to a small line of little houses, and as Mother and I tried to stretch the soreness out of our backs, he and Will unloaded our baggage. I should have said something to him. I should have at least smiled instead of just staring with my mouth open. Not only was he tall and handsome, but he was very polite. Although I could still detect a southern drawl and a bit of a twang in his voice, his speech was quite proper and refined. Maybe he hadn't noticed how silly I had acted. If I had only known then what a rude person he was, what a total hick, I wouldn't have even given him a second thought. Thanks for listening.